Here we go.
Alright. Allow me to regale you guys with the story, it's a love story actually, between a country and a celestial body. That's right, Pluto and America. And it all starts with this man right here, Clyde Tombaugh. This is the guy who actually discovered Pluto. Pretty crazy. He's from Arizona. Pretty classy. And he's actually the only known American ever to discover a planet, which is kind of why, Americans are so gung-ho about Pluto. And the way that he discovered it is actually pretty cool. So this happened way back in 1930, back before World War II, just to put things into perspective. He was taking pictures of one section of the sky, 1 week apart, and he was analyzing these pictures side to side for 10 months. It took him 10 months when he came across these two images. Now, you may be looking at this picture and saying, like, what the heck am I supposed to be looking at? How am I supposed to see Pluto? Pluto is this dot and this dot, moving back and forth. The whole idea of what this is a blink comparador. This is saying, like, okay, so taking picture 1 week apart, all these stars, they're so far away that it doesn't really matter how far they move in a week, none of them move. But if there was a planet, if there was something else that was moving that was much closer, you would find it. And that's exactly how this worked. That's how we found Pluto. And scientists were like, hey, we found our 9th planet in the solar system. Until 2006, when Pluto lost rank as a planet. When the International Astronomical Union came up with the definition of what makes a planet, and Pluto, unfortunately, did not make the cut for that. Americans absolutely went crazy. Protests were nationwide. It was absolutely ridiculous. All this for, a rock way out in the middle of space. Which brings me to my thesis of Pluto should be classified as a planet again. And I will be convincing you of this through my 3 main points. My first main point is that Pluto should be a planet because when it was found, it was originally considered a planet. My second point, Pluto should be a planet because the reason it lost planetary status is invalid. And my third point is Pluto should be a planet so that scientists can focus on more pressing matters in space. Alright, leading into my first point, Pluto should be a planet because when it was originally found, it was deemed a planet. So, back to 1930. Scientists were looking for a planet X way out in the solar system because both Uranus and Neptune were experiencing irregularities in their orbit. That could only be explained through there's a massive body way out beyond both their orbits that's pulling them just a little bit to throw them off in their orbit a little bit. So this was all calculated. And that's how Clyde Tombaugh knew where to look. Then scientists looked at their calculations and they were like, hold on. Neptune and Uranus are not actually experiencing irregularities in their orbit. We made an oopsie in our math. So Clyde Tombaugh managed to find a planet using wrong calculations, which means he found a needle in a haystack whilst looking in the wrong haystack. That's kind of crazy and ridiculous. And when he found it, all the science erupted and was like, there's a planet. And it was awesome. It was considered a planet. They didn't know how big it was. The big discussion of should it be a planet became prevalent when scientists figured out how big it actually was. It wasn't super massive. It's actually kind of small for a planet, which then led to the International Astronomical Union saying, hey, maybe we should come up with a definition. So they did. And this is the definition that they came up with. This is my second point. The reason Pluto should be a planet because the reason it lost planetary status is invalid. So, the International Astronomical Union came together in 2005, and they were like, guys, we got to come up with a definition of what actually makes a planet because nobody really knows. And this is what they came up with. So it's a celestial body that, 1, is in orbit around the sun. Check, Pluto meets that. 2, has sufficient mass for itself to overcome rigid body forces, so it assumes hydrostatic equilibrium. Pretty much, it's a sphere. Check, Pluto makes that one. And number 3, it has cleared the neighborhood around its orbit. That's the one that Pluto doesn't meet because it actually is within the Kuiper belt, and it turns out it's a little harder than you think to clear out an asteroid belt as a planet. So that's the part that I am saying is invalid. Which part is invalid? So according to University of Central Florida scientist Philip Metzger, and this is coming from the where's it at? The 2018 Science Daily article, Pluto should be reclassified as a planet, experts say. So Philip Metzger, this is the lead scientist saying, hey, you know what guys, we need to reconsider what actually makes a planet. And he's saying, part C, that's the part we need to throw out because it's never actually been used before. Well, it's been used once before 2006, in 1802. The definition was used to classify something as a planet. Unfortunately, they use it incorrectly, so really this third part of the definition has never been used to classify a planet. So why should we all of a sudden be saying, yes, that's the part that we want to be talking about? So instead of talking about, clearing an orbit as defining a planet, which part of the definition should we focus on? And Philip Metzger goes on to talk about how being a sphere is actually the most important part of becoming a planet because that's when you go from an asteroid to active geology, so like plate tectonics. This is where you start to have an active body as a planet. Fun little fact about Pluto, it's actually the second most interesting planet in the entire solar system. It's got more active geology, it's got multi-layer atmospheres, it's more interesting than Mars. And Mars is easily considered to be a planet. So why on earth are we saying, oh, Pluto's not a planet because, it's too small, this, that, and the other thing. Which leads me to my third point. Pluto should be a planet because, Pluto should be a planet so that scientists can focus on more pressing matters in space. So this is coming from Ian Sample's 2018 article, Mars One Mission, a one-way trip to the Red Planet in 2024. That's right, we're sending people to Mars in 2024. We're sending 2 men and 2 women in 2024 with more people to follow them in 2026. And I personally think that it's always a good idea to have more eyes on these numbers, more eyes on these people, just, keep them safe, make sure we're not making more oopsies in our math. And yeah, there's definitely more pressing matters in space than, rocks in space, flying around in the very outside orbits of our solar system. So, to conclude, I hope I've convinced you that Pluto should be a planet through my 3 points. Pluto should be a planet because it was originally found to be a planet. Pluto should be a planet because the reason it lost planetary status is invalid. And Pluto should be a planet so that scientists can focus on more pressing matters in space. But this is just me talking. I want you guys to take this to heart. I want you guys to further this research. So I encourage you, go look at the International Astronomical Union definition of a planet. Go look at the history of it and consider for yourselves, how should we define a planet? Come up with your own definition. Make sure there are no gray areas so we don't end up with more cases like Pluto. Thank you.